The X ending crescendos to a bloody spectacle of a finale while also throwing up several lingering questions for its audiences. Director Ti West's 2022 slasher X follows a film crew as they arrive at a secluded Texas farm to shoot a pornographic film in the late 1970s, which idealistic fictional adult movie director R.J. Owen Campbell believes will be a piece of cinema. Seemingly blinded by their ambitions to capitalize on a burgeoning home video porn industry, the young group remain largely unaware of a covetous presence in the farmhouse next door in the form of Pearl, Mia Goth. However, as night falls, Pearl's lustful intent turns violent, with Maxine, also Mia Goth, Lorraine, Jenna Ortega, Wayne, Martin Henderson, Jackson, Scott Muscuddy, Bobby Lynn, Brittany Snow of Pitch Perfect, and R.J. forced to contend with the horrors of Pearl's jealousy. Ti West's X has got horror fans hyped the world over for many reasons, not least of which is because of the franchise-spawning X movie ending. Yet, despite acting as a clear love letter to the slasher franchise, Ti West's X ending is far from straightforward. Between several big character deaths and hidden clues that point to a whole canon unexplored in the movie, X's final scenes are quite the rollercoaster ride. The X movie ending has also spawned a prequel entitled Pearl, which follows the killer from a young age and explores her origins, and the upcoming sequel Maxine. As a result of the wider significance given with the hindsight of it being the start of the X-Pearl franchise, here's the X movie ending explained in detail, including what the film's finale really means and how it ties into Pearl and Maxine. What happens at the end of Ti West's X? The X movie ending conspires to close the narrative loop of Ti West's film, bringing audiences back to the bloody scenes shown in the X first act. The X ending sees just two surviving members of the porn crew, with Maxine hiding under Howard, the Lord of the Rings trilogy's Stephen Ewer, and Pearl's bed while Lorraine is locked in the farmhouse basement. Pearl and Howard, excited from the savage murders they have just committed, have sex, allowing Maxine to quietly crawl away and find Lorraine. However, when Mia Goth's Maxine frees Lorraine from her basement prison, Lorraine reacts rashly, unfairly blaming her promiscuity for the horrors that have unfolded across X's runtime. Panicked, disoriented, and hysterical, Lorraine attempts to run from the farmhouse on foot, only to be shot by Howard. X's endgame then ensues, with Lorraine's death rattle scaring Howard and inducing the heart attack he has long since dreaded. Enraged by the death of her husband and confidant, Pearl, also Mia Goth, attempts to shoot Maxine with Howard's shotgun, but the force of the weapon's blast throws her backward, breaking her hip. As Pearl lays stricken on the floor, begging for help, Maxine decides to take revenge for her slain friends, reversing over the aging Pearl's head in RJ's van in a particularly sickening scene before driving at breakneck speed away from the farm. The next morning, Sheriff Dentler, James Galen, and the rest of his police force arrive at the house to retrieve the crew's bodies, which they still believe to be intruders following Howard's earlier call to police. However, the police soon discover RJ's film camera and speculate what the footage is, indicating the aging Pearl and Howard's murderous deceit will soon be rumbled. X then ends with a shocking reveal that Maxine is the daughter of a conservative Christian, whose local televangelist-style speeches have been playing on Pearl and Howard's grainy television throughout the movie. Why Pearl is a killer in Ti West's horror movie X ends with Pearl killing RJ and his pornography crew in the movie, with Pearl's jealousy at the group's hedonistic pleasure reaching a murderous rage-fueled crescendo. Pearl's envy at their overtly sexual lifestyle is also why Howard barks at the group to stay away from the farmhouse itself, knowing full well that his wife will react poorly to the porn film being shot on their property. Yet what X does less well at explaining is why Pearl has killed so many times before, particularly given Howard's admission midway through the film that he has cleaned up the murderous Pearl's messes in the past, as evidenced by the car in the lake and the chained corpse in the basement, then expanded on in prequel Pearl. It is unlikely that there are many roving groups of pornographers looking to use Howard and Pearl's farm in the 1970s, leading audiences to rightfully query what Pearl's specific homicidal trigger on this occasion actually was. The prequel established Pearl was already a killer prior to X, but the justification for her final spree in X itself is best explained by her covetous nature, which comes to the fore as she watches over a sleeping Maxine. Pearl's confidence when strutting around the farmhouse and the talk of her glory years before the First War indicates a singular desire for her to return to her former, beautiful self. In this way, it is inferred by X that Pearl kills out of jealousy and spite against her own mortality, rather than being purely triggered by sexual acts as X's story initially indicates. This also tracks with Mia Goth's casting as both Maxine and Pearl, with Maxine closely resembling a young Pearl as an overt nod to her lost youth, taunting her throughout T. West's movie. Who is Maxine's father? What it means. As aforementioned, the X movie ending shockingly unveils Maxine's father as the local televangelist barking at his acolytes on Howard and Pearl's old TV set. On-screen, the Christian preacher reveals that he is Maxine's father and subsequently prays for her to return to the family and God. This biblical tie to Maxine's less than pious life is subtly repeated throughout X, with the film's final girl often repeating "I will not accept a life I do not deserve," a sentiment lifted from Mark chapter 10 verse 15 verses in the Bible. Bible verses are of course a long-standing horror trope used in classics like The Exorcist all the way to modern shows like Servant, but X uses them particularly well to hammer home its narrative themes, instead of simply adding a bit of gothic horror flavor, as some movies and shows do. Maxine discovering her heritage affirms her own, oft-used mantra to herself, with Maxine now using her father's prosperity gospel as her new driving force. Maxine's X ending is somewhat ambiguous, leaving it open to interpretation whether Maxine chooses to seek her family or not, but her most likely destination seems to be Hollywood, with Maxine speaking of making it in Los Angeles before the bloodshed at Howard's farmhouse begins. No doubt the sequel Maxine will cull this ambiguity, but for now Maxine's reaction to her father post the events of X is unknown. The real meaning of X's ending. While on a tertiary level, X's ending is classic slasher fare as the final girl overcomes the murderers and escapes, T. West's new horror is interwoven with more symbolism than Maxine backing over Pearl's head with a van would suggest. The symmetry of Maxine killing Pearl, both played by a cure for wellness Mia Goth, is representative of a natural life cycle, with the new outlasting the old. Pearl covets that which she can no longer have, youth and beauty, and, despite her best efforts, can never attain it, with Maxine rebuffing her advances before defeating her in the final act. In this way, Pearl is representative of convention, while Maxine represents change, and while the two inevitably clash, change inexorably comes out on top both in the real world and in X's final reckoning. The X ending set up a franchise. T. West's X has basically set up an entire movie franchise, with the prequel film Pearl and the X sequel Maxine currently in the making. While the X movie ending adds a dash of finality to Pearl's story, it completely opens up the world to Maxine, who will be the frontrunner in the upcoming sequel. The story and origins of the X-Killer are explored in the prequel film Pearl, which came out 6 months after X. What these two films do is answer two major questions set up by the X ending. The first is, why did Pearl become a killer in the first place? Pearl is set at the same farmhouse in 1918, when Pearl is a young girl with big dreams. She lives with her overbearing and critical mother and invalid father, and while Pearl waits for her husband Howard to return from World War I, she's forced to take care of the latter. During this time, Pearl also discovers she has a penchant for abusing and killing farm animals. The ex-movie killer Pearl had dreams to be a chorus girl one day, and she's given a shot when she goes to an audition, which she, unfortunately, doesn't get. One by one, her family members are killed off, and Howard comes home to quite a surprise. Pearl's gory ending rivals that of X, and also sheds a lot of light on why Pearl has such uncontrollable bloodlust by the time RJ and Maxine arrive in the 1970s. The second question from the X movie ending is, what will happen to Maxine now that she's free, especially in the advent of the revelation that she's the preacher's daughter? Horror movie director and fan T. West is set to answer that question with the upcoming X sequel Maxon. Maxon has no release date yet, but is confirmed to be on the horizon. Based in 1980s Los Angeles, Maxon will follow the exploits of Mia Goth's titular character as she tries anything, and everything, to boost her way to stardom. The teaser trailer reveals that there will be plenty of 1980s pop culture fun and flair as X did with the 70s and Pearl its 191 setting. Period horror director T. West brought his A game with X, so much so that this singular film set up an entire franchise full of great horror Easter eggs.